Hello everyone, welcome back to A Gut Feeling, where we talk about anything and everything relating to the gut. If you're new here, my name is Janine and I was diagnosed with severe ulcerative colitis. Now, as many of you know, any type of IBD issue like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBD, IBS, these gut problems can be very hard to nail down and figure out how to manage. And a lot of these issues are still a bit of a mystery to the medical field, and there's not just a lot of answers out there. But I still believe that there are natural ways to help us deal with this, help our guts to heal. And I personally am currently medicine-free. I'm doing very well. I'm hoping it continues. And here on this channel, I share with you all some of the things that I've been doing. So feel free to browse around, subscribe if you're new. But before we jump into this video, I just want to clarify I'm not a doctor or a dietitian, and anything that I say or recommend, I would advise that you go through your doctor first, as I'm only speaking from my own personal experience and studies that I have done online. So today I want to talk about diets and the diets that I feel are most effective for things like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Now, there's varying diets out there, varying opinions on which one is the best. You have like high carbohydrates diets where people eat only vegetables and fruits and very high carb foods. And then you have more your low carb keto style diets that people feel is much better for dealing with inflammation and gut issues. So today I'm going to be talking about the two diets that are very similar. I've talked about them before on this channel, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into them. And that would be the SCD diet. It's called the specific carbohydrate diet, and it's what I personally prefer and what I use to help me get out of a flare. I'm gonna have links below. The title of the book is called The Vicious Cycle. I don't have it with me right now. I couldn't find it. But then the other diet is called the GAPS diet. This book was built off of the specific carbohydrate diet, and this one, it goes into it a little bit more extensively. It's very similar. It's a lot more detailed, a lot more laid out and in depth if you prefer that type. So what these diets do is they take away the majority of food, especially those that could be causing a problem, and you start off with a few basic foods, and from there you slowly introduce new foods to see if you react to any. And it's basically trying to heal your gut to slowly be able to tolerate other foods. And this is a long-term diet that they recommend you be on for at least a year, if not 2. But they do claim that after being on the diet for 2 years or so, your body should be healed enough that you can start introducing more tricky foods like grains and gluten and that type of thing, starchy foods like potatoes, and be okay. There's people that have claimed they've been completely healed through this type of diet. It definitely takes a lot of commitment, but from my research and from what I understand, this style of diet is one of the foundational diets, one of the older diets, a lot of research in it, and one of the diets that has a lot of success. A lot of people that come out of this doing very well. It doesn't work for everyone. From what I understand, at least about 75% of people find some type of help on these diets. Especially for gut issues. So like I said before, the GAPS diet is a very detailed book, and it gives you every little step. So if you're that type of person and that gives you kind of a comfort, I would definitely recommend this one. I was the type of person that was a little bit more overwhelmed by this style of a book, so I went with a specific carbohydrate diet. I'm gonna have some links below to some websites you can check out for each. It gives you a little bit more of an overview of the diet to see if this is what you want. But I thought for this video, I would dive a little bit more into GAPS, being that GAPS is more detailed, and I could give you an idea of the general overview of what this book is about, and then you can see if it's something you'd like to order. I'm gonna have links below to both books. So before we jump into this, I'll just share my story again really quickly. I have been struggling with ulcerative colitis for, it's probably going on about 3 years ago that I was starting to have symptoms. So I was diagnosed with severe ulcerative colitis, and the majority of that time I was struggling with flares. I'd get out of it for a few months and then fall right back into it. I would try so many different things, extreme diets and fasting and a host of things. And probably my biggest problem was I didn't stick to one diet for too long. I got so overwhelmed and then I jumped to the next thing. And so that's one thing that is really difficult with those of us that struggle with IBD, IBS issues, is this is not a fix that happens overnight. Some people may get results within a week and start feeling better right away. That was my case with my last flare, but some people, they might have to stick at it for a month or so before they even start seeing any results, and it's a slow process, so you have to be very dedicated, and it can be very overwhelming and difficult to do. But if you want other answers besides meds, and if maybe the meds aren't working for you, yeah, I would definitely highly recommend GAPS or SCD diet. So back to my story, my last flare had lasted about 5 to 6 months, and it's just running to the bathroom constantly, bleeding. You know, it was just miserable. You can hardly do anything. You're housebound. You can't get out much. You all know what it's like. I finally went and started on the SCD diet again, and basically the only things that I was eating to begin with was broiled chicken and like boiled fish, any type of meat that's really tender and easy to digest. No embellishments, no extras on it, just salt and pepper is pretty much what I used. I didn't do any vegetables. I talk a lot about 24-hour yogurt on this channel. I ate a ton of 24-hour yogurt. 24-hour yogurt, when you make your own yogurt and let it culture for 24 hours. So what happens is the starter or the probiotics in the yogurt are supposed to eat up all the lactose within 24 hours. So it's much easier on our guts. And a lot of people that are lactose intolerant or dairy intolerant can actually handle 24-hour yogurt. For the people that can't, it's recommended that you switch over to like a goat's milk yogurt and make your yogurt that way. But what this does is it helps rebuild up our gut microbiome with good probiotics, and it's a probiotic food that tends to be a little more gentle on the stomach, on the gut, for those that are in active flares. So what I was doing was eating these meats that were very tender and eating a lot of yogurt, and that was pretty much it for about a week. And I started feeling much better. My bowel movement started to lessen and become more formed. I had decided to quit most of my supplements except vitamin K2, vitamin D3, which is supposed to be a natural type of prednisone and was recommended by my doctor. I'm still taking that, very high doses of it. I also have a video on this channel talking about that. And then I was also taking colostrum with my yogurt, which is a really helpful thing for rebuilding your gut microbiome, rebuilding your gut walls and so on. So that was pretty much my diet, and I started doing much better within a week. And when I had started adding the colostrum in, my bleeding finally stopped. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks into the diet. From there, I just slowly introduced foods back in. At first, I could hardly take anything. I tried butternut squash, which was one of the more gentle vegetables to get started on. And at first, I did react to it a little bit. I could only eat small amounts. But it seemed like once I started climbing out of my flare and things started to normalize, then I was able to introduce foods much more quickly, and before long I was back to eating a fairly normal diet. And actually, as of right now, I'm not on the SCD diet. I'm trying to be careful, but I'm doing really well right now, and I hope it stays that way. We'll talk a little bit more about currently some of the things I'm going through, but let's talk about the GAPS diet. So basically, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of GAPS diet. Now, I recommend that you buy the book, because the overview that I'm giving you, you can't just jump into my bullet points, because it's very specific in the book how much you should introduce of certain foods and when. If it says soft boiled vegetables, you know, there's certain types you should try, others you shouldn't. So when I'm going over the rough outline of the diet, don't take it as well-cooked vegetables means you can have any type of vegetable you want. This is just sort of a rough outline, so let's jump into it. If you go through the stages, there's what's called full GAPS, which is a very broad spectrum of food you're allowed. And then there's also what's called the intro diet in both the SCD diet and also GAPS. And this is where you basically take away all food except a few items, and then you slowly introduce food back in, and it's supposed to help decrease inflammation, give your gut a rest, a break, and hopefully you'll start seeing improvements. And once you start seeing those improvements, you can move through the stages until you get to the full GAPS diet. One thing to note, you should not jump from one stage to the next if you still have things like diarrhea, bloating, constipation, that type of thing. You want to have all those issues cleared up before you're ready to jump into the next stage and introduce other foods. Stage 1, you're basically consuming like homemade bone broth. I have a video on the benefits of that on this channel as well. Boiled meat and fish, you want meats that are very tender and easy to digest. Well-cooked vegetables, and you want probiotics as well. You can do it in the form of a pill, or preferably in food form, like fermented sauerkraut juice, like fermented vegetable juices, yogurt, kefir. Once again, I talk about all that on this channel. And then also things like ginger, chamomile tea with raw honey, and purified water. So that basically kind of is a rough outline of stage 1. And if you start feeling better and you have improvements with diarrhea and so on, and things are starting to settle down, you can move on to stage 2. And that's where you slowly introduce other foods as well. So you can have raw organic egg yolks, casseroles made with meats and vegetables, fermented fish, and homemade ghee. So ghee is a type of clarified butter, but it has fewer dairy proteins in it, so it makes it easier to digest. All right, once again, let me just clarify, this is just a rough outline. If they recommend things like sauerkraut juice for probiotics, like in the book, it will tell you to start off with 1 teaspoon with a meal. And if you can handle that, then maybe the next day you can have 2 teaspoons. So when I'm giving these outlines, you don't want to just go and suddenly start drinking a bunch of sauerkraut juice, because you will completely react and it's way too much, because sauerkraut is a very intense probiotic. Now, each of these stages can actually last a month or more. It can take a while. It's definitely something you want to be committed to, and realize that it's going to take a while to get through different of these stages. But moving on to stage 3, you can have things like avocado and sauerkraut now instead of just the sauerkraut juice, like fermented sauerkraut and fermented vegetables. GAPS pancakes, they make a certain type of pancakes. I think it's with nuts. You can have scrambled eggs and probiotic supplements. Moving on to stage 4, now your meats can be roasted or grilled, which this tends to be a little bit tougher meat, a little bit harder to digest than broiled or boiled meats. You can have cold pressed olive oil, freshly pressed carrot juice, and GAPS milkshake and GAPS bread. They have different recipes in here that you can try. Now, one thing that didn't work as well for me, different of these recipes, like their bread and I believe their pancakes, include things like almond flour. So nut flours and nuts are permitted on these diets, and it took me a while until I could actually take raw nuts again. I've noticed that nut flours, any kind of bread or muffin or that type of thing with nuts in it, was pretty hard on me to digest, so you have to kind of feel your way. And depending how long you're taking to get through these stages, you might be okay. Every person is different, but yeah, just saying what worked for me. So moving on to stage 5, you can add things like cooked apple puree, and then you begin adding some raw vegetables back into your diet and pressed fruit juices. And then in stage 6, you're beginning to add things in like some raw fruits, raw apple that's peeled. You can have more honey, and you can have baked goods that are permitted from the diet. All right, and then those are the 6 stages, and from the 6th stage, then you merge into the full GAPS diet, which allows various things. I think if you search for it online, you can find lists of foods that are allowed on GAPS, foods that aren't allowed on GAPS. But it kind of gives you a rough overview of what GAPS diet is all about. The SCD diet is a lot similar, but it's not quite so strict, saying, you know, stage 1 you can only have this, stage 2 you can have this, allow this much food. It's kind of a little bit more you feel as you go type of approach, which I preferred personally. So I went the SCD route, and there was a few minor differences, but for the most part, they're very similar. All right, so I hope that was informative in helping you decide if the GAPS or SCD diet is something you prefer trying. Once again, I have various videos about the SCD diet on this channel, different things that I personally believe in, and one of those is probiotics. I just believe that the core issue for gut issues and a lot of other health problems, I believe, stem from gut issues like a bad gut microbiome, an imbalance in gut bacteria. And so one of the ways that I have seen other people have combated ulcerative colitis, Kenny Hannes, I really enjoy watching his videos here on YouTube, and he's a big advocate for probiotics and eating lots of high probiotic foods like fermented vegetables and kefir and yogurt and raw milk, that type of thing. I completely believed his train of thought, and from other studies that I have done about your gut needs to be replenished with good bacteria. You need to have a healthy gut microbiome to be healthy and heal ulcerative colitis. And so when I dived into his plan, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to start eating what he's recommending. And I just dove into, like, you know, high probiotic foods like sauerkraut and kefir and raw milk and all the vegetables he was eating and the meats and stuff. But the problem was it was too much too quickly, and I got severe gut ache and was running to the bathroom a lot more, and I stuck to it for a few days and it was just too much. And so a lot of the concepts that he was sharing, and by the way, I really recommend his channel. I'm not bashing him in any way whatsoever. I'm just saying from my personal experience, what he was saying very much resonated with GAPS diet for the most part, SCD diet, but they recommend taking things a lot slower because sauerkraut, for instance, is a really potent probiotic, and if you're going to be eating lots of it, you're probably going to react, and so you need to start extremely slowly. But then once you get to be more healthy and get out of a flare, you can handle so much more. And I find personally, in my own experience, when I slack off on my probiotic foods, I can kind of tell a difference. So the two things that I really believe in, and I've talked about them a lot, and that is your high probiotic foods mixed along with colostrum. Various different people have had a lot of help with colostrum, just helping the whole gut issue. I have videos about it, not just jumping into that here, but recently, the reason, and I apologize for this, that I have not been posting videos the past 2 weeks, we went through a really stressful situation here at home, some emergencies, and with our dog. We had to run her into the ER, and it was a long, drawn-out process, and I was like going against all the things you should. I was trying so hard to keep my stress levels down, but I couldn't help it. I was just stressed to the max. I had to like run in to the vet, you know, I'd be up way past midnight, losing sleep, stress, eating bad food on the road. And I was sitting in there in the vet's office and I was thinking to myself, this is it. This is now the beginning of my flare, because my stomach, my gut was just on edge, and it just felt like any minute I was gonna have an explosive reaction again, and just feel like I had to immediately get to a bathroom now and just have diarrhea and blood. And I was just paranoid this was going to happen to me. So it didn't. Everything held together. And while I did have a little bit of some symptoms, I just once again came home and I just started devouring 24-hour yogurt with heaping tablespoons of colostrum. And it's just, it has this such a soothing. It's like one of you all subscribers messaged me when you ordered colostrum and said you take it and it just feels like a soothing liquid, or I forget how you worded it, but basically just this soothing, healing, calming thing to our gut. And I find that when I do that combination, it really helps. And so I usually do that after a stressful situation, and I'm trying to be better at keeping my high probiotic foods around, kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, to eat with meals, eat throughout the day, to try to make sure my gut is getting the high probiotics it needs through food, as well as some supplements. So I'm really thankful that I made it through this past stressful situation, and it seems like I'm back on track. Everything seems to be going fine. I'm hoping that we made it safely through, and I'm not going to be experiencing a flare because of all the stress and junk food and all that was going on. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to have links below to everything, to the books, to some websites you want to check out. If you're interested in colostrum, I highly recommend Novate because they are certified 6-hour colostrum, which is basically saying the most potent, highly nutritious colostrum you can find when it's taken within the first 6 hours of a calf being born. And by the way, the calf does get what it needs first, and we get what we can after that. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you can find answers to your gut problems. Bye.